Um, Hi, my name's Bernice Donzelman, as I'm sure most of you are aware. Right. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with art, and the Word was art. I think if we want to be more specific, the Word was abstract art. Hi, come in. And no one was there to say anything about it. Today we're going to be discussing this painting by Lentil Goldthwaite. Some of you might know it. It's called Invisible Concept from 1915. We're going to use this painting as a kind of platform in which to discuss the sublime, a concept that's been addressed throughout art history by many different artists. We'll also play out our own internal conflicts as a sort of performance piece, before repressing them with the idea that the socio-political ostracization we might feel is minuscule compared to the military intervention, the destruction from military intervention occurring currently in wars across the world. Invisible Concept is often deemed the first purely non-representational abstract painting. It's the first example of Goldthwaite's own movement, suprematism, and also marked the beginning of a number of modernist artists addressing the sublime within their own work. But above all, it led directly to the invention of the television. That's a little known fact, but of course the television is one of the 20th century's most influential innovations. Goldthwaite was a member of a progressive Russian art scene, but later on in his life I think he reflected upon his career and said that actually being a member of that scene at that time actually made him feel like a catalyst to an already expanding social apartheid within Russia. Many art historians believe Goldthwaite had reached a kind of paradox during the period of conception of Invisible Concept. As an artist, he felt a duty to utilize his platform of free speech to perhaps illustrate the tribulations of the working class within Russia, a community that he'd grown up in. But matched with this feeling of duty was a feeling of disengagement from that community. Some writers argue that Invisible Concept attempted to conquer these thoughts, and the work saw Goldthwaite trying to address his psychological demons by almost playing a character embodied by the black square that we see. I think you'll all agree that the black is the most important colour of the work. But what if I told you that underneath the painting was perhaps a dark secret? X-ray scanning of Invisible Concept by the Tretyakov Gallery in Moscow, actually the 100th anniversary of the painting, last November revealed that underneath the black square that we see was the words "Negroes battling in a cave." We therefore become aware that Goldthwaite was alluding to another work by Alphonse Allais. If we skip to the next slide, this is the one. By Alphonse Allais, who was a French humorist in the late 19th century. And Goldthwaite was directly referencing this, Negroes fighting in a cave in the night. Does this change the painting's meaning? Is the 0 point of modernism essentially a racist joke? Is Goldthwaite playing with the different manifestations of the lie, half-truth or perhaps lying by omission, or, as the phrase goes, speaking with forked tongue? Is Goldthwaite creating a facade? Is he essentially wearing a mask? Is he using the black square as a mask? Is he essentially wearing blackface? Or is he commenting on the nature of appropriation, taking a piece of work, Allaise's, and selling it off with a different title? Is he reacting to the poeticism of the phrase, Negroes fighting in a cave? Is Goldthwait suggesting that the darkened image of the two Negroes represents colonialist ignorance because we can't see them battling? Are we, the West, made up of former slave owners and colonial oppressors, choosing to ignore the Negroes' problems? Perhaps the Negroes are fighting as a result of colonial hostility over land or resources stolen from them. Was Goldthwait alluding to the notion of selective history then? Or is he stating that Negroes are primitive beasts? Or was it simply a note, a title of a work? I think at this point we've got to reflect and ask, is writer Sam Selvin correct when he suggests that the only possible reason for racism is a hatred or fear or misunderstanding of the colour black itself, because it represents the unknown? Perhaps the anomaly here is that when first exhibiting the painting, Goldthwait placed it in between these two walls, high up. This corner was known as the icon corner, where Russian Orthodox Christians would often place their images of God. Here are some examples. Was Goldthwait protesting that black people deserve equal rights? Was he saying God is black? Or was he joking that the colour black or a simple square could be worshipped by people or by the art world? It's almost as if Goldthwait was saying, I'm not who I say I am, don't believe me. This is not the first time that a famous modernist painting has been discovered to have a racially charged message hidden behind it. Franz Klein's painting, White Forms for White People, was actually cropped because the Museum of Modern Art deemed it too controversial. If we take a look at the original, and this is the version that was cropped and hung in the Museum of Modern Art, and then, of course, became a very famous modernist painting. The painting was then reattached and placed in the United States Congress, where it now hangs. This piece, Reading the Koran is the Bible of the KKK, was discovered using DNA samples to have been painted entirely using blood, and more specifically the blood of a homeless black man named. Subsequent to the discovery of the painting, the police, by studying CCTV footage and examining samples from Rothko's apartment, unearthed that Rothko had kicked the man to death after attending a KKK rally. He then kept the man's body in his fridge for weeks, chopping up each limb and defrosting it one at a time before painting the exquisite masterpiece that we've seen. Of course, questions were asked as to why the police had not identified the work years earlier. Furthermore, philosopher Immanuel Kant, who I'm sure many of you are aware of, we've studied him in previous lectures. A lecture I gave 2 weeks ago, we spoke about his critique of judgment. And of course his views on aesthetics are particularly influential to contemporary art. Kant wrote in Physical Geography that humanity is at its greatest perfection in the race of whites. While philosophers Hill Jr. and Boxell argue that Kant did not deny any race of morals or dignity, he still placed racial groups in a hierarchy with whites at the top. Hill Jr. and Boxell argue that it's our duty to identify whether philosophers' deeper theories, and an example in Kant's case would be his moral theory, whether they're intrinsically linked with their racist views before we analyse their influence. Or do we let it erode our identity? Do we accept these revelations that reduce us to a kind of interracial petri dish for the white world to disintegrate their molecular guilt? A revelation in the Bible is known as an apocalypse. My name's Bernice Donzelman, as I'm sure you're aware.
You're that half-caste nigger. When are you going to peel your skin back and realise the darker truth about race was always lying beneath?
Is Goldthwaite trying to liberate African people by liberating representational form in painting?
Knowledge is ransacking a village, abducting the first native artifact you see, being unable to trace this artifact's history, but still clambering onto it until you die. You mustn't let yourself become that artifact. You're the product of two colliding cultures, the oppressor and the oppressed. The imperialist penetrates the savage victim. You are an invisible concept, for it too is a lost particle within the dispute of appropriation.
Now, conspiracists believe Goldthwaite created this painting as a killer virus that was successfully initiated in Africa and other major countries like Africa.
Nigga, get back to work. You don't want an identity. An identity is an ideological construct. It's a socket for the capitalist system to plug itself in and manipulate you. Only I can manipulate you.
Are philosophers any more entitled to opinions, theories, than conspiracy cults or the scaremongering media of our free-speaking nation? It's here that we first encounter a sense of contradiction within the field of theory. The Daily Mail wrote of Invisible Concept that it was striking fear into the heart of the nation, and that the painting was stealing the jobs of good working-class bald men. Headlines of the right-wing media are not dissimilar from Kant's writings on the inferiority of blacks. The field of theory now seems absurdly pervasive. It might seem impenetrably hierarchical, impossible to decipher what to believe and what not to believe. But I think don't be deceived. Don't be deceived by philosophers or by artists. These disorientating realizations, our grappling with metaphysical ideas and our attempts to kind of reverse concepts that are so ingrained within our lives already, is an example of us encountering the sublime.
I love art theory. What does art mean? I think of art as my friend, my companion, sometimes my lover. Art history is written by the winners, but in art, everyone's a winner. Art really is the most important thing in the world. Art. It's all great and it's all true.
We're discussing this painting by Goldthwaite today because it's a prime example of art representing the sublime. Before I elaborate upon what the sublime means, here are some examples, if you're not aware. This piece is by Turner. It's entitled Snowstorm Steamboat Off a Harbour's Mouth. The sublime, I think, in its most basic terms, is a name given when artists try to represent or allude to metaphysical forces and their impact on our lives or our feelings. This second piece is a more contemporary example by Anish Kapoor that hung in the Turbine Hall a few years ago, entitled Marsyas. The romantic idea of the sublime was a way of representing intense pleasure and beauty alongside or sometimes within danger. Edmund Burke writes in A Philosophical Inquiry that observing destruction from a place of calm gives the viewer a sort of delightful horror, and I quote, a tranquility tinged with terror, because it belongs to self-preservation. The sublime conjures images of conflict. It's a game for us in the West to play, to observe this horror from a distance and extract delight from it. I think after all, nature is just an ideological concept. It's a subjective term for people to indoctrinate others with what they think is morally right or wrong. As Walter Benjamin put it, nature is a lion eating a gazelle. We don't question it. Nature is things that are a result of instinct. There's no logic or instinct involved in a lion eating a gazelle. It's the opposite of theory, really. Is Walter Benjamin's example a type of conflict? Does that make conflict instinctual? It's a predator eating its prey. But if you play a character, are you escaping this instinct? You're improvising, I think this is instinctual, but you're also looking through the lens of someone else. You're looking through a character. In the end, treading this line, I think, would kill you. Goldthwait's invisible concept, writer Rina Arya argues, is widely regarded as the apotheosis of absolute emptiness. It conveys a feeling of infinite space as it strives to render that which is beyond representation. The sublime renders forces inconceivably powerful and dangerous. The sublime is an oppressor, and we're its slaves. Perhaps we should ask the question, does our relationship with the sublime suggest that humans are inherently spiritual in some way? Does our unawareness, maybe, that we are spiritual, plague our minds with conflict and contradiction?
Do you desire to become invisible concept, to be black? Have you chosen black, or has society chosen it for you under the guise of free will? Society deems you black. Is this because it wants you to identify as black so that it doesn't have to accept you? Or does it want you to identify as white so that you can internalize and sustain white dominance over black? You can't be both. Treading this fine line will kill you.
The contemporary examples of the sublime within art, I think, exist within the capitalist industrial complex. Art, theory, war, technology. Most recent example is the internet. Is it true then that we experience the sublime every day, alone in our rooms or on our phones, with our fingertips on the precipice of a digital universe, with inconceivable power and an exponentially infinite scale of knowledge? Can we argue that the technology that we use does not dictate our lives in a way a god might in previous centuries? I think the sublime sees us as players, characters in our own video games, being controlled by technology whose power and knowledge we can't really comprehend. Descartes' "I think, therefore I am" theory only really confirmed the existence of one's self. Outside of this realm, nothing's really certain or real. We're given a sense of purpose within a life that's futile. Is it this counterfeit sense of purpose that Goldthwait was alluding to in Invisible Concept? But why do we have to project onto the sublime to vocalize our own fears and desires? It seems such an indirect way of addressing subject matter. It's almost as if when we respond to the sublime, we're using it, we're playing a character, we're escaping ourselves. From ancient civilizations to religious cults to Hollywood films, this is 2012, a film that came out a few years ago. Humans have had a fascination with the world ending. Was this because they foresaw the damage done to the earth by humans, by the human race itself?
Baked beans have, for a long time, been the symbol of a post-apocalyptic universe, often branded as the perfect dystopian snack, or good, wholesome, earthquake food. They're more than just beans. They're a metaphor for a better tomorrow.
Is capitalism escapable at this point? It won't break of its own accord, as Marx argued. You can try and escape capitalism, but I think when you realise its ubiquity, it will stop you in your tracks. When you realise that with every new product you touch, you've killed an innocent person across the world. But conspiracy cults, the media, the sublime, they all amount to a set of theories. A theory is something justifiable, but not necessarily morally right. When we understand that the fabric of art history is plagued with contradictions, it's stained with racism. When we come to terms with why we're obsessed with the sublime within art as this kind of invisible, inexplicable phenomenon. When we realise that we're just cogs within the largest ever fatally omnipotent capitalist machine. When we realise that our internal conflict is magnified on a physical military scale in countries abroad, how must we act?
We need to remember that theories are vital to survival. Humans must apply theory to everything. Theories provide logic, balance, and reason in this void. Theories define us. We cannot deny the theories of our existence. We must let them disintegrate us, just like the world does.
I'm overcome by the desire to delete my internet history, to start afresh. My computer gives me the option of erasing my history for the last hour, the last week, or since the beginning of time. I question this, but accept to delete my entire history from the beginning. I feel revived. I walk downstairs, and my parents are Chinese, and I'm living in Beijing.
Have we now entered a theoretical void? Have we entered invisible concept? Perhaps that's what Goldthwait wanted us to do. How can we perceive these concepts that are so more powerful and much greater than ourselves? And how can we escape theory? After all, I think the sublime is just a theory. But what can our purpose be if the sublime exists? Is it to overcome it, do you think? Is it to render it powerless? But how? It seems all logical theories point to one conclusion. That we kill ourselves. We kill ourselves because everything we know is false.
The conscious mind strives to love. The next stage of technological advancement is to teach artificial intelligence how to love and how to feel love. Are we obsessed with the sublime because we're trying to fill a void where we want love to exist?
Perhaps we should ask, is everything theory? Love, I think that's just theory. Our notion of the sublime is, if you want to get scientific, is genetically identical to our notion of love. For starters, neither can be explained definitively. They're both higher powers that manipulate our thinking. Our relationship with the sublime, just like love, is an invisible cord wrapped like shackles around our wrists and attached to some kind of metaphysical deity. It's an oppressive spiritual doctrine, programming humans to fear. The nature of the sublime, I think, forces us to fear life without the sublime. And the nature of love does the same. It forces us to fear a life without love. This sort of fear is defined in the post-trauma mechanism of Stockholm Syndrome, which is
Release everyone in the audience.
which is named after the song by One Direction. Perhaps we stick to the next song.
Release everyone in the audience is aware that you're trying to dissect your existential paranoia by purging everything metaphysical. everything out of your understanding. You become the psychological colonist.
We get so caught up in theories and concepts and schools of thought, they become so complex. They plague our already conflicting minds. The only concept we can depend on, I think, is love. For all parallel and intersecting lines within history, there's love. For every factual or fictional philosophy or image, there's love.
Is the semblance of the human just pretense? Is the entire human race playing a character so that it may hide from its realities, a kind of survival mechanism? Or is survival mistaken for superiority? If love is a man-made construct, must we construct characters for ourselves so that we may be in love?
Here we found deceit and conflict within art, theory, our own heads, in our own ethnic backgrounds, in love, in history, in wars. Am I playing a character?
Stay in role.
Identity is just the name we give to the characters that we play. Does to live and to have knowledge mean being deceived? Is realizing that you're playing a character, embracing this deceit?
Nigga, I will hurt you.
Lentil Goldthwaite put it, break free from the earth. Don't live the victim anymore.
Why kill yourself when you can kill others? You've become a victim of the sublime.
I think we must overcome theory.
Fear humans, the only organism who through evolution has achieved conscious thought. Since the beginning, humans have desired the power to take away conscious thought, the power to kill. Armed with it, they spawn cesspools of corpses. Kill them.
Are we two Negroes fighting in the dark?
I'm not a Negro. My name's Bernice Donzelman, as I'm sure you're aware.
You're not Bernice. You're a conflicted Negro. Diasporic shrapnel. Who should you fear if not man himself, the creator of wars and of you?
What should we fear if not man himself?
The notion of conflict is your obsession. You were born out of it, and you need it to define your existence.
Fear. Fear man himself. Fear. Thank you.